Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a Patreon supporter replay. This is Andy CX in the Bayern, and this sort of feels like an appropriate ship to be playing at the moment, or not playing, showing, because of course we have the battle cruisers in their pre-release state, and this is the last of the battleship line that is of that same era, although it of course does have a rather ahistorical refit, especially with the top hull. Its AA was never this good during World War I, that's for damn sure. And I think that's actually a thing with, I think through Tier 5 or is it even Tier 6 with the battle cruiser line, is they do have something close to their historical AA, which isn't very good. So, yeah, that definitely seems like a big disadvantage. I haven't actually unlocked any of them. I haven't ground out enough tokens to even get the Tier 4 yet. So, yeah, I'll get there. I'm not putting in the effort all the time, really. I'm doing other things, other gaming things with my time these days. I'm still playing a bit of World of Warships, but, you know, I did say I was going to pull back a bit on World of Warships, and here we are. Anyway, this ship, though, it is pretty decent, especially in this matchmaking. Top tier. There is a carrier in play on each side, but the AA on the Bayern is actually pretty reasonable when you're facing a Tier 6 carrier. It's not going to knock down all of the planes that get thrown at you, but over the course of a game, it should, in theory, make a difference. You should have fewer planes coming at you, rather than if they have weak AA to go up against and therefore have more planes to preserve to throw at you. That was a bit of a janky sentence, but anyway, we're on the other side of it now. Probably the biggest advantage this thing has is that, well, 15-inch guns at this tier are pretty good. They're not the biggest anymore, but the 16-inch guns premiums tend to have rather worse reliability in terms of actually hitting things. Not that Bayern's great in that regard by any means, but it's good enough, and it's functionally better than when it first came out after the change they made to the German dispersion pattern, because previously it was fairly bad, and then it's not like it's brilliant now, but it shares the same dispersion pattern with, I think, the American battleships. So yeah, it's nothing amazing, but these are big guns for the tier, and when they hit, they can hit pretty hard. He's already got a dev strike, and that was a fairly nice 10k there as well. There's definitely an element with German battleships, though, of some games your guns really feel like they're behaving, and other games not so much. This is going to be one of the games where they do behave and act rather nicely, but we'll also get to see some secondary action in this as well. I mean, that's one area where this maybe does a little bit better than it did after the captain skill rework, because of course they rejigged how secondaries can be affected by captain skills. So if you want to go for a secondary spec Bayern, you can. Although, to be fair, at this tier, it's probably not going to be as useful as survivability build, just because the Bayern is not super fast. It's not super slow either. It's actually one of the kind of mid-speed battleships. That makes sense, right? But it's around what you can get with the Queen Elizabeths as well. It's sort of, what, 24, 25 knots. Not the fastest at the tier, but compared to, say, the ITL Friedrich, where you really are quite a bit speedier and you can perhaps close the distance more effectively to get those secondaries on target. With the Bayern, you have to have incautious people that aren't trying to run away from you, and in the case of this Congo, they really could run away from him. The Congo is definitely a faster ship, but yeah, for some reason they decided it would be a good idea to get in close with a Bayern, and that was a bad idea. We also had a sneaky destroyer pop up on his port side. We can actually see the outline, the trace on the mini-map, so there's torpedoes to be wary of. He can either give some broadside to this Congo and hope they don't smack him too hard, or he can get hit by torpedoes, which would be really, really nasty. So yeah, he's doing some manoeuvring here and hoping that this destroyer, well, I mean, they're within secondary range, but hoping that they're maybe focused on the Bartan. Now he's got the carrier dropping planes on him as well. Actually, no, I don't even think that was the carrier. I think that was ASW plays, wasn't it? There wasn't really much point to that. You do see people doing that, and it can have a point. You can basically figure out if somebody is behind an island or you know, in smoke or whatever. You send the ASW planes over. But in this case, no, it didn't serve any purpose. They don't do anything to do any damage to anything other than submarines. So the destroyer did drop torps on him eventually. They must have been in a cooldown when they made that rather kind of risky move coming around the corner. And I think it was the Bartan that actually finished them off. So no torpedo damage taken, which is good. And he actually took out an enemy battleship who really wasn't playing the best they could be playing, let's be fair, and hasn't taken that much damage in the process, although he is down a bit. So the next contender is this Graf Spee, who is firing HE for now, but those Graf Spee 11-inch AP shells can also have an effect, and this Graf Spee does know enough to be using those against a broadside target. Andy, meanwhile, is going to have no problem with the Graf Spee's armour, and is obviously aware the Graf Spee has tried to drop torpedoes. It's an 8-kilometre torp range on that thing. There they go, sailing rather harmlessly past. You kind of have to get in close with the Graf Spee's torps for them to be effective. I mean, you can certainly do it against enemy battleships. I think later on in a game, if you've managed to preserve enough of your health, it can be a really effective move. You get in close and you use those excellent torp drop angles, and you can just wreck face. But this isn't that stage of the game. Andy has rather too much health, and definitely wasn't any kind of effective ambush strategy what they were doing. Now they are using their AP, and it is going to do more damage to Andy than their HE would have, especially as Andy really isn't angled against them right now, but he's just trying to finish off this Graf Spee before he tries to pull into the middle and deal with what's there, because if he lets the Graf Spee get away, then they have a heal. They could come back with more health and potentially be nasty later on. So it doesn't quite get the kill when he does set up the Emile Bartan to get it. So there we go. Missing a kill perhaps by the whims of RNG, but he got most of that Graf Spee's health, and that's put him up to almost 100,000 damage. This is already a good damage game in the Bayern, considering how these guns can be. Certainly helps that he's top tier and that he doesn't have particularly tough armour to deal with for the most part. They don't have great pen, these shells. They really don't. You are absolutely relying on the calibre of the gun to do the heavy lifting rather than the penetration of the shells. So against some tier 8 targets and even tier 7 targets, they don't perform nearly as well, even if you still have overmatch capabilities. So that is an enemy Bayern that's trying to make a getaway. It's not a great angle for actually landing any kind of reliable hits, but if he can hit and it doesn't just hit somewhere that's going to bounce, he can at least be reasonably assured of doing some damage. They're also not really focused on him, so this is a fairly safe situation for him at the moment. The enemy carrier is for now focusing on the Bartan, who is trying to hunt them down and in fact has just spotted them. So that's the Ryujo that's not going to be bothering him for the next little while, and the Bartan might even get to kill the Ryujo. The Bartan is quite a speedy little tier 5 cruiser, not the fastest firing 6-inch gun cruiser, and its armour is made of paper, but if he can survive the Ryujo's attacks, if he's got enough hit points for that, if he can dodge sufficiently, then he should be able to take out that Ryujo, because they left it way too late to move anywhere. Apart from the Bayern and whatever other battleship that is that's about to hove into view. What is that, an Ismail? Yeah, the entire rest of the enemy team is concentrated on the Sea Cap. So looks like it might even be Annie's kill. There we go, nice. Not a lot of extra damage out of them, but a kill for his trouble. The Ismail did just take out a friendly though, the Andrea Doria. They are now, though, very broadside. And that could be a really nice situation for these guns, potentially. They aren't angled really much at all. They're starting to. I think they're maybe starting to realise their peril. And I don't know if they are focused more to the Bayern on the north, or maybe thinking about perhaps crossfire from the October Revolution. And although that's unlikely, actually, the C-cap remains of the enemy team are now making a push out. More ASW planes. I mean, I don't think it's going to be much of a distraction, to be honest. But, you know, if you've got nothing else to do, I suppose. Not like there are any submarines in play in this match. Ismail coming around broadside, maybe trying to get all their guns to fire, and does get all their guns to fire. But broadside at that range, whew, they should have tried to stay angled and maybe would have stayed alive a little bit longer. But as it was, that was hefty whack of damage. That was what, 40k-ish damage? Maybe a little under 40k damage. So not quite enough to trigger another Dev Strike badge popping up. But yeah, still a pretty hefty amount. He's well on his way to capping another cap as well. It's not often you get to cap in German battleships that are not particularly stealthy, but in this case it's kind of working out that way. And he's also got some more broadside shots on things pushing through, although he's not going to get quite so lucky. I was only 1 pen on that Iron Duke. They're also quite healthy, and Andy himself isn't so much, although he could heal at this point, and possibly will realise that in a moment. It's possibly just a bit too focused on trying to get the right amount of lead for this Iron Duke, which is, I think the first time was just not quite enough, and then this time, well, we'll see. He's still got a good angle, at least, and that time 2 pens, so that was a bit better. Maybe still a little bit more lead, but it was harder to tell when he wasn't zoomed in. So of the enemy ships, I mean, there's a Visby and those 2 battleships. The Visby we know is over there. The Bartan has killed the destroyer, the carrier, and is actually now sat on 4 kills, and he's got 3, and the October Revolution's got 2. That surviving Bayern has none. And I don't know why I'm listing off all the kills, but I kind of started with the notable ones and then I just kept going, I suppose. So that is Andy being still thoroughly ignored, still not using his damage con. He could be doing it on purpose to maximise the benefit of Adrenaline Rush. I think that's pretty much the only reason why you would do this in this kind of situation. If you're not being actively shot at, you want to keep your reload as quick as you can have it. But I don't know if he does have Adrenaline Rush, because, well, these days, once it kicks in, you get a little icon showing up, and maybe it did at the start, and I just missed it. And everyone in the chat, in the comments, is going to be saying like, "Jedi, you fool, you missed it. It clearly popped up." Or it could be it's just not showing up in replays because it's a new feature and it's not showing up in replays yet. Sometimes when new UI features, elements, whatever get added, they don't always show up in replays, or they don't work correctly in replays, so it might be that. Anyway, we know the Visby's moved up and is toying with the October Revolution, but they are actually closing towards Andy, maybe trying to help him out against this enemy Bayern. The October Revolution doesn't have any shots on him. His own allied Bayern might, but it's going to be some very, very awkward shots. He's kind of actually pulling out of where he's going to have any shots. And so Andy's effectively alone against this guy right now, even though, in fact it's a 2 versus 1, even though he's got 2 allied battleships left alive. Now the October Revolution's just been trying to juke away from the Visby, so that's kind of understandable, but I really don't quite know what the allied Bayern is doing. I think he was able to take some shots, but yeah, Andy's hope of coming out of this in terms of like gunfire, especially coming into this kind of close pass, is probably not high. He did actually try and take out the Visby as well when he was spotted, but no, he knows he's not going to survive, and honestly, this is a good trade to make. If you know you cannot survive, he certainly wasn't going to be able to get his turrets to keep up with that. Even if he'd done a pass, he still would have had the Visby to contend with, who might just have been able to gun him down. So yeah, absolutely, if you can be in this a situation where you are way ahead on points, it's an equal trade, and you know you're going to die anyway, then that actually seems like a really good time to go in for the ram. So we're cut off about the last minute and a half, 2 minutes. The Visby does actually manage to kill the October Revolution, who did turn away again. The Bayern's still mucking around in the middle, and the Bartan's managed to get around to the sea cap and is grabbing that. But yeah, even if they hadn't, this would have come down to probably winning on points at the timer, because we were in the last minute of the game there. So it was a nice little top of XP for the Bartan, but not exactly crucial to the game. Anyway, so Andy managed 195k with that ram. He also had the Kraken, and he had a Confederate and high caliber on top of that as well. Oh no, not a Confederate. It was a Dev Strike he had early on, wasn't it? It wasn't a... It was something and a Dev Strike. I've forgotten which one it was now. It was Confederate, there we go. No, we did have a high caliber as well, so... Okay. I'm getting myself confused. Unsurprisingly, that was all enough to put him well at the top of the team. That was a good... over 2,500 base XP. The Bartan, actually, not that far off. 2.1k. Not too bad at all. And yeah, of the enemy team, I think it was the Bayern that he rammed that ended up being on top. So yeah, that was a really good showing for the Bayern. The guns are not often quite that reliable, and yeah, the last bit of damage was from ramming, but it's not one of those games where somebody does not very much gun damage and then rams somebody for like 60k. There really was a fair bit of work done before that point. So yeah, that was a good round. It was entertaining, I thought. So as mentioned, this was a Patreon replay. You can find the link to my Patreon down below if you feel like supporting me even a little bit. I know I don't do as much World of Warships these days, but if you like the other content I'm putting out as well, then, you know, $1 here or two does help, or whatever your local currency may be. Otherwise, you can do all the usual other things in the comment section and so forth. And, of course, as always, stay tuned for more.